Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by Spot by NetApp. My name is Cody, and I'd like to welcome you back to Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting presentation, but before we get things rolling, we do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to review with you. Today's session is being recorded, so if you'd like to review our material after the fact, or perhaps you'd like to share it with your team, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand. If you would like to engage with us today, there are a couple of options for you to do so. The first option is the chat tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. So I see some of you have already started to use it, but I would like those of you who haven't to go ahead and let us know where in the world you are joining us. Now, if you have any specific questions, we do want you to direct those to the Q&A tab. Sending your questions to the Q&A tab helps us ensure that we can actually answer them and keeps our questions in a nice orderly line. So be sure to send in those questions early and often. We do have a couple of polls that will be presented as slide outs throughout our program today. We won't be calling much attention to them, but you will see them pop out in the bottom left corner. So we do want your responses there. If you click the handouts tab, you'll see there are some additional resources there for you. So feel free to grab those. And before we close things out today, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around to see if you're one of our lucky winners. Our conversation today is ready, set, take control of your Kubernetes software deployments. And I'm joined by Zach Harabedian, product architect at Spot by NetApp. Zach, thank you so much for joining us today at Techstrong Learning. I will go ahead and give you the floor at this point.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Cody, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Zach Harabedian. I'm a product architect with the Spot by NetApp team, and excited to talk to everybody today about taking control over your software deployments. And let's dive right into an agenda. So we'll start off with just a quick introduction, and we'll dive right into a little bit about the current state of cloud native CD, talk about some of the challenges preventing teams from taking control over their own CD process. We'll talk about empowering devs to take ownership of their deployments. What exactly does that mean? And a little bit about automation, automating your rollouts, rolling back when you need to. And then we'll introduce Spot Ocean CD, and we'll talk a little bit about how that fits into the overall ecosystem. So just to start off, a little bit about myself. I'm a proud dad and husband to 2 cute kids. So I have a almost 2-year-old and a 2-month-old at this point. So I like to put that disclaimer out there. If I'm looking a little tired, that is probably why, suffering from a little sleep deprivation, but it's all good. They're a lot of fun. Overall, I'm a big Kubernetes nerd, all things cloud, and I would say that's a lifelong problem of mine. And I also have a couple interesting hobbies. I've been a firefighter and an EMT for almost or a little over 10 years now, and it's still something I do on the side. I also am a big aviation geek, so if anyone wants to talk aviation after the call, always happy to do so. And then a firm believer of no DevOps engineers left behind. So one of the things one of my mentors shared with me, and excited to talk to you guys today a little bit about what Cloud Native CD is all about, and also just introducing Spot by NetApp. So Spot by NetApp, if you've ever heard of Spot.io or Spot Inst, it's all the same company. We were acquired by NetApp about 3 years ago, I think, today. So what we do today is we provide a cloud automation platform that is focused on continuous optimization or cloud ops. So cloud ops is all about building best practices in the modern cloud to make sure that you're successful in deploying and operating in the public cloud. Okay, so let's jump into some cloud trends in modern software delivery. And the first challenge that a lot of companies are facing is just the simple migration from monolithic applications and VMs to microservices and container-based architecture. Why exactly is that a challenge in and of itself? Well, when you think about that shift, there's a multiplication effect. So migrations used to be, or monolithic applications, it used to just be one thing to worry about, right? Like one VM, or even auto scaling groups. But now microservices, you have dozens, hundreds, thousands, and it's a lot more to manage. And the other thing that is changing rapidly is the increase in deployment frequency. So back to that previous example of the um, the monolithic application example, when you increase your deployment frequency, all of that requires more upkeep, right? So you need to be able to scale for the demand of those frequencies. And also the other big trend is shifting left. So trying to shift that responsibility back to the developers and service owners, but also in a way that is sustainable, right? So giving them the tools that they need to quickly identify if there's a problem before it becomes a production incident. And just to look at some data around this, and also dive into a few more trends here. So the other emerging trend that we're going to talk a little bit today, and also go into a demo about, is adhering to GitOps principles. So GitOps is like a really emerging trend within the CD world, which is like focusing on like your repo is like your single source of truth. So using whatever GitOps repo you're using and making sure that that is your single source of truth. When there's a commit to the master branch or a branch, making sure that synchronizes to your cluster. But I would say GitOps is only part of the CD equation, because there's also factors you need to think about as it relates to the automation. So how exactly, like with that multiplication of microservices architecture, how are you looking at metrics for your new version? How do you know that everything is healthy and behaving as you expect it to be? Are you monitoring a dashboard? Are you using a third-party monitoring tool and using that to react to your changes? Or maybe you're taking a different approach. But what the studies are showing, or the latest surveys are showing, is that there's an overall increase in your deployment frequency and a overall decrease in the automation. So that's what you're seeing here. This is from a cloud native compute survey, which goes to show that a lot of this burden of CD and the shift to Kubernetes is really all falling on DevOps. And it's a challenge that a lot of companies are trying to manage and create scalable best practices for. And when we think about what are those other, or how exactly does that transmit into a challenge? Well, for starters, CD is really like that final mile, right, of getting that new version of your application out into the environment. And where things start to get a little bit tricky is even before that deployment. So we're talking about like your CI process. So before we get to delivery, building out some tests, making sure everything is behaving as you would expect it, and creating scalable practices based on that. But once we go through that CI process, now we're talking about getting that new version into multiple environments. Companies are splitting responsibilities in a number of different ways, and you'll face companies that are creating clusters for specific applications. Sometimes you have these mega Kubernetes clusters, and you need to figure out how to lock down permissions on like a namespace level. Really, the sky's the limit with how these clusters and environments can be configured. But ultimately, it leads to a lot of complexity, and especially a lot of complexity at scale. And usually, the impact of those trends I mentioned is going to be ultimately leading to a lack of confidence. So a lack of confidence on both like the DevOps engineers and a lack of confidence from the developers who are ultimately trying to get their new version out into the environment. So why exactly do they not have confidence? As you saw on the previous slide, and I'll go back here, if we're releasing more code and we're not increasing the automation, ultimately we're not going to feel so great about that. So how exactly can we increase the automation? How can we build automation that we trust, that goes out into our environment and is behaving the way we expect it? Ultimately, the natural way is going to be through checking monitoring tools. So chances are, if you're using some type of CD tool in the public cloud, you're also using some type of monitoring solution, whether it be like a native tool to something like AWS, where you're using CloudWatch, or you're using Prometheus. Chances are you're checking something along the way, right? I'm sure a day doesn't go by that you're not looking into how your applications are behaving. So there really becomes a need to tie all of those together and go through those challenges one by one. And I'm going to be highlighting a few different tools throughout my presentation today. And these are just considerations that I think everyone here should take into consideration. But please, again, if you have any questions as we go through, we will certainly try to take some time and get all those questions answers. All right, so the final point I want to make before jumping into like a little bit about how we tackle those challenges here at Spot by NetApp. And the first, or one of the big impacts on all of those challenges is how time-consuming things are. So when you have an issue with a new version, how much time are the application owners taking to debug and fix what the issue is? Does your tool provide a quick and easy way to get to the root of the issue? Same thing goes for DevOps, right? Are DevOps resources needed every time that there's an issue with a rollout? From the business perspective, of course, like if a new version makes its way out to production, that causes downtime. If you're an e-commerce platform, that can cost you thousands of dollars in a matter of seconds or minutes. So there's no need to deep dive on that. I just like to put that out there. And I'll say like the last challenge as it relates to cloud trends is finding talent. So you guys are, I would imagine the audience is mostly DevOps engineers, and you guys are hard to come by, and you're always going to be outnumbered. So there's usually a ratio somewhere where you might have 5 or 6 DevOps engineers supporting 100+ developers. And there's, as you saw, the studies and surveys are showing that there's a lot more. It's all falling on the laps of DevOps as we go through here. So I'm going to start to introduce Spot Ocean CD. This is a product that we've been working on here at Spot by NetApp for the last 2 years. And it's all part of our Ocean Kubernetes suite, which we're aiming to make like your one-stop shop for all things Kubernetes. So Ocean CD is like a natural extension of our Ocean product, and it's a Kubernetes continuous delivery solution designed specifically for Kubernetes. Why do I even mention specifically for Kubernetes? Well, because there's a lot of, I'll say, like container-specific considerations that are different from a monolithic uh, thought process. So what we provide with OceanCD is a software-based solution that you will deploy our OceanCD controller into your existing Kubernetes cluster. And what that controller is doing is it's constantly looking at all of the deployments that we are managing for you. And it's looking for any changes that we detect within those applications. If we do detect a change, we go back to our SaaS layer, and our SaaS layer is going to tell us what exactly to do with that deployment. So once we detect that, and we will go back to our SaaS layer, the SaaS layer is going to say, okay, we should do a canary deployment. We should check your Prometheus metrics. You'll predefine actual Prometheus queries that matter to you. And you'll also define success and failure conditions based on like your monitoring tool. So you can say, okay, I need to check the failed transaction rate of this application, or the failed or the latency of X, Y, and Z in this namespace. You'll give us what is a success and failure condition. And from there, we will continue to shift more traffic to it. So maybe we're starting off shifting 10% of the traffic to that new version. And maybe we need a senior developer to approve that next phase. The point is, we're continuously verifying everything at every step of the way with your new version. And if at any point something doesn't behave as you expected, we will roll back the actual deployment. So the end result is giving you a way to deploy more and fail less, and hopefully give your developers and DevOps engineers the confidence that they need to do exactly that. So now let's talk a little bit about GitOps. So GitOps is an emerging trend where ultimately we're trying to make our repos the source of truth. And there's a lot of debates out there about, maybe Helm is what we're using today. I'm not here to talk about GitOps versus Helm or anything like that. I will say that I think GitOps is a great scalable solution, and what that does is give you that like declarative approach of, okay, I need to synchronize my repo with the cluster, but it doesn't. What it doesn't do is control the actual rollouts in a safe and controlled manner. And that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve with OceanCD. So we are GitOps friendly, and I'm going to show that in my demo. And what we do from there is run these controllers within your cluster to ultimately communicate between our SaaS layer and your Kubernetes cluster to make sure that everything is behaving as you would expect it. Okay, so a few other goals, and these are also tackling a lot of the challenges that I mentioned earlier. The key concepts are getting customers from zero to canary deployments in a matter of minutes. So we've built some hands-on workshops that let customers see it for yourself. So we'll make sure, I think those resources are actually in the chat over here. So with that, you can confidently deploy in gradual stages, and canary deployments is another thing that a lot of our customers are trying to get to, but maybe they didn't have the time and effort to invest in getting there. And there's a lot of complications with getting to canary deployments. The other thing that OceanCD offers is a SaaS-based model. And the benefits and power of a SaaS-based solution is being able to give you like a multi-cluster, multi-cloud solution in a single pane of glass. And just like any of our other products at Spot, when it's part of our overall Spot platform. It gives you integrations into role-based access control. So if you need to lock things down by specific teams, or you need to control things by namespace, really whatever the use case is, it's all things that can be controlled within the platform. And then also notifying the appropriate teams. So if you want to integrate into our Spot notification center, you can use Slack webhooks as an example to track your rollout progress, get alerted to any failures, things like that. So all of those can be tracked and monitored within the platform. And last but not least is mitigating those incidents before they actually happen. So that's the power of continuous verification, making sure that we're setting you guys up for success and only releasing code that is healthy and behaving exactly how you would expect. And of course, there are two different types of users within, I'll say CD in general. It's not just specific to Ocean CD. You have your DevOps engineers that are ultimately building pipelines, trying to build the automation, trying to reduce all of the manual work that they are doing. And they are also trying to enable the developers to have more control. And then on the other hand, you have your developers who probably don't want to have to learn about Canary deployments. They want a way to just get their updates out there into the environment without having to be a CD expert. So they also need a way to identify failures in the early stages and be able to take action on them. So those are all things that we'll take a deeper dive on in just a couple of minutes. And I also just like to show this slide as my last slide here to show where Ocean CD fits into our overall Ocean Kubernetes suite. So we have at the bottom here, we have your data plane. So this is where like the majority of your worker nodes in the Kubernetes cluster will sit. And what our Ocean product does is it scales and handles all of the data plane infrastructure. So as new pods come into the cluster and they're pending, we'll figure out what is the best instance type, size, and family to launch within the cluster. From there, we continuously optimize it by bin packing, moving pods around that are underutilized, terminating underutilized nodes, things like that. Ocean CD is a natural extension of that in that we are taking control of the software layer. And the way that we do that is, again, deploying our operator and managing what we call spot deployments within your cluster. So that is a little bit about the overall trends and challenges within modern day CD on Kubernetes. And I'm going to dive right into a live demo. And also, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them while I'm switching screens here. All right. So what I'm going to show everybody here is just walking you through what Ocean CD is, what your experience is going to be like as it relates to walking through our UI. The other important thing to keep in mind here is everything I'm showing you within our UI can also be done via our API. So we're an open API. And also we have a CLI that is really neat for managing all of your software entities within code. So let's jump right into it here. So when you walk into Ocean CD, the first thing you're going to get is an overall dashboard of your performance. So if you're a manager and trying to understand what is the efficiency of your rollouts, maybe I need to drill down into specific clusters, specific namespaces, however your organization tracks things. You can slice and dice that using the filters here. And what that's going to show you is, okay, maybe Zach's deployment is always failing. Maybe he's doing something wrong and we need to take a deeper dive on that. But maybe Cody's is, succeeding every single time, and maybe there's something I can learn from Cody on my application. So that's your dashboard. Once you get into the settings tab here, this is all of the entities that you'll create to utilize Ocean CD as a SaaS solution. So with a SaaS solution, the neat thing is we can make all of our entities, or almost all of the entities, completely reusable across multiple clusters, multiple clouds. So you'll notice when I connected my cluster here, we'll detect it and we'll provide some details around making sure that it's healthy, that there's a heartbeat from our controller, communication is okay, all of that. Then we have our spot deployments. So what exactly is a spot deployment? This is our way of knowing which deployments we should be managing for our customers within Ocean CD. The only difference between a spot deployment and a regular Kubernetes deployment is the API version and the kind. So behind the scenes, we're using these Kubernetes custom resource definitions to essentially recognize what we should be managing for you within the cluster. So those are the only two things that would need to change from the way you're currently running things. Then we get into our verification provider. So this is our way of knowing how to communicate with whatever monitoring tool you're currently using. So I think there was a question in the chat here about what are the recommended approaches to monitoring and troubleshooting Kubernetes deployments. This is really the first layer. So the first layer is going to be tying into whatever monitoring tool that you're using and giving us a way to communicate with it. So if I take a tool like Prometheus, there's going to be a DNS name for the Prometheus server. And what I can do here is I can list out all of the different clusters that the DevOps team is managing. And within a couple seconds, I've created that communication to all of my clusters within my organization. So it's very quick and easy to get that initial stage up. And then once you set up your a way for us to talk to Prometheus, for example, we need a way to understand what metrics are important for your organization. So that is something only you can tell us, but what you can do is you can actually define specific Prometheus queries that matter to you. And once you define that query and tell us what's important, the other thing you'll need to do is you'll need to tell us what is successful and what is a failure. So how many times can this Prometheus query come back not as you would expect it before it constitutes a failure? Again, this can be reused on any of your clusters, any of your environments. And it's all going to tie into your underlying strategy. So your strategy is what, again, tells us exactly how or what to do with your deployment. And the strategy is going to essentially point to some of those different entities that you previously set up. So I gave my verification templates a name and a way to reference it. And you'll see here in this example that we're doing a canary deployment. I'm going to shift 20% of my traffic to this new version. While I'm doing that, I'm going to actually be checking my Prometheus query. I'm going to be checking a custom webhook that I have set up that I know matters to my application. And I'll continue shifting more traffic after everything behaves as I expect it. So once we set up that, the last piece is going to be setting up our rollout spec. So this is the one entity within Ocean CD that is cannot be reused over and over, because we need to know what, we need a way to tie an actual deployment into all of those other components. So the neat thing about the rollout spec is you might have pieces of your application that should be all tied together in that when you make a change, we should be checking the same set of metrics, the same set of everything else. And if one metric fails, everything should be rolling back for all those different components. So that's all how you would be able to set up your different entities. And once we have all of that set up, is where it comes into, I'll say, the fun part. So the fun part is actually triggering changes to your application and seeing everything come together. So I think this will make a lot more sense for anyone who might not be following me 100%. So this is where you can see everything start to come together. So I showed that example of the Canary deployment shifting X amount of traffic to that new version. And what that does is give us the opportunity to go out to Prometheus and check those metrics. Now, I want to circle back to the second part of the question that came from the audience here of how can we get visibility into the health and performance of those applications? So the first piece is giving us a way to talk to your monitoring tool, where whatever tool that might be using will be able to onboard that into Ocean CD. And once you're connected and we can talk to your monitoring tool, of course, we'll check the metrics and everything, and the success and failure conditions is pretty straightforward. But you also need a way to see, like, what are the actual Kubernetes events that are taking place within the within this rollout. So you'll be able to see all of that within the events tab here. You'll be able to see all of the different Kubernetes resources that are being created within the application or within the rollout. And then you'll also be able to see what exactly is the difference between the old desired state and the new desired state. So it's a very quick and easy way to figure out, okay, maybe the image that I'm using changed, maybe something else changed. But if you're an application owner, we'll put that scenario here that, okay, I'm going to make this change. Maybe I got an alert via Slack that something broke and I need to further investigate that. So this is kind of the flow of how things would look. Now, let's go back to GitOps for a second and talk a little bit about what that means. So I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview of Argo CD, and just to go through a few points there. So the important thing with GitOps and like Argo CD is taking that repo as your single source of truth. So that's why you're going to see like check marks that everything, or my two applications that I'm running, are synced and healthy. And the reason that, or the other neat things you can do with Argo CD as an example is you can use some of their neat features around like a post-sync hook. So like, how do you promote to the next environment? Just as an example. All right, so now let's go to the repo that is referenced within Argo CD. So I have my repo, and hopefully you guys get a good laugh that I spelled Ocean CD incorrectly within my repo. I was looking at it the other day and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I'm like, something looks off, but eventually I found it. But anyway, taking this repo and making it our source of truth, how exactly does this tie in? So what I'm going to do is make a change to one of my deployments, and I'm just going to change the image version to my spot deployment. So there's nothing really else to this deployment. There's a few different replicas, but the only change I'm going to make is publishing the new image. So I'm going to commit that change to the master branch. And if I click into my application, I'm going to see that it went out of sync, and we need to apply that new change. And now, once we did that apply phase, and again, this is what GitOps is all about, of forcing that synchronization process from your repo to your environment. So now that ultimately there was like a kubectl apply of that new version, this is when we're going to go back out to Prometheus, and we're going to check those metrics and make sure everything behaves exactly as I expect it. So the same thing goes for this custom webhook that I'm using. We're going to go out and check those metrics as well. And we'll be able to see the traffic split between the canary pods and the stable pods. So that's what you'll see here. That will continue to update throughout the ongoing rollout. And if I go back to my repo, I'm going to demonstrate the same thing on a rolling update. So this is probably what a lot of, or this is what most of our customers are using before Ocean CD or trying Ocean CD. And a rolling update might work perfectly fine for a lot of your services, but the feedback that we will normally get is that we need a way to check metrics as well for even a rolling update. So we provide that ability to actually go out and, even as part of a rolling update, look at the different metrics that are going on within your rolling update. So you'll see a lot of similarities here. So this will look exactly like our Canary deployment, but we're going to actually look at the metrics and apply that same success and failure logic within the Canary deployment. A few other neat things that I want to dive into while these updates are ongoing is some of the different capabilities that you can set up within our notification center. So this is taking the example of figuring out or giving the power to the actual application owners in a scalable way. So what I can do within the Spot Notification Center is I can set up these event policies that basically will say, okay, for these specific clusters or these specific rollouts, I want to get alerted to, any time that there's a new rollout. I want to know if there's a failed metric, really whatever errors can happen within a rollout, I want to make sure that I know about. So those are all things that you can predefine and set up. And what you can do very easily is also set up like a Slack integration. So you can make sure that the right teams are being alerted for their actual application updates, and we're not creating noise within the other environments. Okay, so let's jump back and see how everything is behaving. And you can see that there's a pause here listed on the current rollouts that are ongoing. The pause capability is a pretty neat feature in that this gives you a way and maybe a real life scenario of, if I'm doing a Canary deployment and I'm deploying a new version out to X%, maybe 2% of my customers, I need somebody with elevated permissions, like a senior developer, for example, to actually go out and manually approve that. So you can have fully automated pauses where you can just specify a time duration within your strategy, or you can set things up in a way that you can actually go out and require the manual approval step. Another thing that you can utilize to take full control over your ongoing rollouts is the UI, and again, CLI API, same capabilities. You can promote things to the next phase. You can fully promote things. You can pause the rollout exactly where it is if you need to quickly debug and investigate something a little bit further. All of those actions are going to be available within the UI. So those are just a few of the different actions that are available. And let's check back into how this is progressing. So this rollout should be finishing up shortly, and then we'll be able to take a look at how that translates within Argo CD, and making sure that the sync status is in line with our repo and everything checks out. Okay, so we just had our first rollout finish here. So now if I go into the Canary application within Argo CD, I can see everything is okay, and I'm up to date with that change that I made within my repo, and everything is behaving as we expect. So that is really like the end-to-end example of taking your change to the repo, synchronizing that to the cluster, Argo CD doing that kubectl apply, and then Ocean CD picking up that that process and turning it into a progressive delivery, progressive software delivery process. Okay, so we'll just check on this last rollout, and this is approaching really the tail end of our presentation. So I want to make sure that if anyone has any other questions, please post those in the Q&A, and I'll do my best to answer them as they come in. Okay, so this rollout should be now live. All right, so now both of our rollouts are complete, and we can see that it is now live. So if we click into that, we can also see what is the new and old version of my application. And I'm also able to see within Argo that my rolling update is now synced and healthy. So really that's the full end-to-end GitOps approach, and where we fit into that equation. So the last thing I want to show everybody is with that other trend of deploying more, failing less, and how all this can be scalable, is this page that I'm in right here, our rollout page, is going to ultimately be ingesting rollouts and presenting them from multiple clusters, multiple environments, multiple clouds. Everything that I'm showing here can be filtered and sliced and diced, based on whatever, however you want to look at it. And not just filtered here in this view, but if you want to set up granular permissions and RBAC permissions within Ocean CD, you can lock those down through different permission policies. So you can make sure that the developers that you want to see, or the developers only have access to their applications, and you can make sure that everything is A to Z squared away in terms of permission management, and out of the box, you're good to go. So Cody, I think that really wraps up my overall presentation, and just want to thank everybody for tuning in. And I will switch back to the slides for a quick second. If anyone has any specific questions about the overall CD landscape for Kubernetes or Ocean CD, I'll keep my email up on the screen while we wrap things up here.
Awesome, Zach. Thank you so much for that. It looks like we haven't actually received any questions in the last couple minutes. You did a pretty good job of answering the ones that we did receive. So I do want to give a final shout out to anyone. If you have any questions, send them in right now. In the meantime, Zach, I did just want to ask you kind of what do you think the key takeaways from today's session are? What are the biggest the biggest tidbits that you think our attendees should pull away from this program?
I would sum up by just saying continuous verification is key for creating a scalable CD practice. Being able to utilize a solution that provides end-to-end automation. A lot of I would say the majority of customers I speak with about their current CD practice is a lack of confidence within their automation, and ultimately a lack of confidence with the metrics that they're checking. And I also encourage everyone to look at the benefits of what a GitOps solution can provide to your organization.
Perfect. So kind of in this similar vein, I do want to also point out that we do have additional resources available for you in the handouts. At the top of the hour, we did not have the presentation slides there for you. They are there now. So if you do want to go back and grab those, feel free. And we also do still have our polling questions open. If you have not had a chance to respond, go ahead and just click that poll tab at the top and submit your quick responses. We'd love to hear your thoughts there. So Zach, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping, then we'll revisit questions one last chance. So I would like to remind everyone that we've been recording. You will be receiving an email with a link to access this recording on demand. Of course, you can also find it living on the Cloud Native Now website at cloudnativenow.com/webinars. And be sure to look in the on-demand section where we have this and plenty of other programs there waiting for you. The 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing, they are Joseph M., Abhinav G., Ismail M., and Ari G. So to our 4 winners, keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. It should make its way to you in the next 48 hours. If you don't happen to see that gift card make its way to your mailbox, check your spam folder on the off chance that it does get filtered out. All right, so we did receive one final question. And Zach, so according to you, what is the most time-consuming part of CD pipelines?
I would say the most time-consuming is usually going to be troubleshooting when something goes wrong. So a lot of our customers tell us that once they detect that there's an issue with a new version, it could take up to 45 minutes to actually dive in and debug, where the issues are. So I think that's like why in Ocean CD we tried to make our UI very intuitive and present and ingest all of those logs on the Kubernetes level for quick and easy troubleshooting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do also just kind of want to take a look at the polls, and I'll ask you the questions that we asked the audience. How often do you deploy software updates, Zach?
So I'll answer that question in terms of like the Spot by NetApp platform. And even before we built Ocean CD here at Spot by NetApp, and even before we, I'll say like eat our own dog food, and use the product, we were deploying multiple times per day. And yeah.
Very cool. And I assume on the deployment strategies, you use a combination of the three that we presented in the poll. Got rolling, canary, and blue green.
Yeah, we use a combination. I would say like Canary is really the way for us to have the most granular control. Integrating with tools like Istio to maybe use custom headers to release updates. Like ultimately, those are that's ultimately the way that we will have the most control for our most critical services.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and shut things down. We haven't received any more questions. Zach, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It was such a pleasure getting to speak with you beforehand and then just learning from your breadth of knowledge during our program today. So thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Cody. And I appreciate everybody joining in as well.
Wonderful. So to our audience, if you just stick around for just a second to fill out that survey, it will pop right up and we'd love to hear your thoughts. I hope everyone has a great day and you can now disconnect. Thanks, everyone.